We're going to call this meeting to order, the executive board. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Mary, can we have roll call for the executive board?
Yes, we do have a quorum for the executive board. We have Nancy Adams. Here. Roosevelt Allen.
Here.
Anthony Copeland.
Here.
Don Ensign.
Here.
Jim Tom.
Present.
And Brian Snedeker.
Present. Right.
Yeah, Tom Schmidt, I'm sorry.
Here.
Thank you.
Here.
I know there's a few new faces around the room, so why don't we just quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Brian Snedeker, Mayor of the City of Fulton.
I'm Ty Warner, Executive Director for NERC.
Jim Tunn, Chester Town Council.
Nancy Adams, Porter County Commissioner.
Tom Schmidt from Sherrill Town Council.
Karen Freeman Wilson, Mayor of Gary.
Kevin Bryce, Porter County Surveyor.
Tyler Jordan, Mayor.
I'm Nancy Dollar, and I'm from IDA.
Bruce Earl with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management.
Lori Reno, Clerk Treasurer, Town of New Chicago.
John Baylor, Town of Carroll Creek.
Jeff Benson, Beverly Shores Town Council.
Joe Simonetto, Munster Town Council.
Stan Gomes, Griffith Town Council.
Mary Thornton, staff.
Don Ensign, Town of Haven.
Patrick Copeland, East Chicago, Mayor.
Roosevelt Allen, Lake County Commissioner.
Val Go to City of Chicago.
Justin Mounds, Senator Joe Downey's office.
Ray Dumbers, Michiana Shores.
Bob Carnahan, Cedar Lake Town Council.
Belinda Petrosky, NERC staff.
Rebecca Sis Williams, Town of New Chicago.
Steve Strains, NERC staff.
Kay Nelson, Northwest Indiana Forum. Get back accessor of Faith Cities and Legacy Environmental Services.
Teresa Torres, everybody counts.
Rudy Velasco, everybody counts.
Steve Nowacki, resident of the City of Gary.
Jack Eskin, NERC staff. Bob Moore, Ronald Consultants.
Sarah Gnoski, NERC staff.
Andrew Smith,
Kristen Lazarus, Coast Review. Kathy Weaver, NERC staff. Angie Hayes, NERC staff.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. I think Scott just walked in.
Scott Weber, NERC staff.
Okay, I will entertain a motion on the approval of minutes for the July 17th, 2014 Executive Board meeting. Is there any comments or concerns in regards to this matter?
Move the approval.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have one matter. Ty needs to bring a certificate of appointment.
This, we have an official certificate of appointment with Mayor Freeman Wilson back on the NERC Commission, so welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. Next item before us is the presentation. This is environmental restrictive covenants and environmental restrictive ordinances. Nancy Dollar and Bruce Ortill is here from Indiana Department of Environmental Management to speak to us in regards to this matter.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Bruce Ertl. I'm the Chief of the Remediation Services Branch at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. I'll let you start. So anyway, I'm the Chief of the Remediation Services Branch, and we're going to talk to you today about a topic that is kind of coming to Northwest Indiana, as well as the rest of Indiana. But environmental restrictive ordinances are a new way of closing remediation sites and a new type of remedy that you may see coming to a community, to your community. I work in the branch of the agency that cleans up hazardous waste and petroleum sites. And just to give you an idea of...
Check the side buttons to turn on, because it may not be turned on. On the handheld.
Oh, this.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on.
What is the word fund?
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. So just to kind of give you a really quick context of where we are and who we are within the agency. We're in the Office of Land Quality, and which is broken into a number of branches. Mine is the remediation branch, and which has all of the cleanup programs for the state of Indiana. And that includes hazardous waste, our voluntary remediation program, our brownfields program, our state cleanup program, and then Superfund. We also do remediation of leaking underground storage tanks. Most of you are probably very familiar with that. It's no longer in my branch, but we do remediation at those sites, and there are occasions where you may end up using environmental restrictive ordinances at those sites. The federal program section is made up of our Superfund staff, and those are the really big sites where we often don't have someone to go after to clean it up, and so the federal government comes in and provides the funding and the oversight, and along with us, and we clean those sites up. We also have our state cleanup program, which is kind of a state version of Superfund. And then, I don't know how many of you may be familiar with RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act. Those are typically operating facilities where you have hazardous materials being used, and if, for instance, the drum storage area or a tank or something leaks, then they also have staff that deal with doing corrective action and cleaning those sites up. We have a voluntary program where people can voluntarily bring their sites in and clean them up, and we will provide oversight for them. And then, of course, the Indiana Brownfields program, which was created to help promote economic development, the good use of property, even on those properties where we've had contamination. We have two main types of contaminants that we see in Indiana: petroleum and chlorinated solvents. Petroleum are typically the sites associated with gas stations. There are literally thousands of those types of sites in the state of Indiana, and everyone, if it's a gas station, it's probably leaked. It's really no different than the faucet in your sink. Eventually, you're going to have a drip or a leak, and it's not so much anybody's fault, it's just that things fall apart, and eventually they're going to leak. So most of the gas stations that we see, almost all of them, have had some type of release to the environment. And we have, a group of people that work at cleaning those up. We also have chlorinated compounds, which have increasingly become a problem because of dry cleaners. And we found that dry cleaner sites have also had leaks or things poured down the drain. And chlorinated solvents are highly persistent. They get into the groundwater, they're difficult to remediate, and they stay around a long time. They also, for lack of a better word, off-gas or volatilize into the soil, and those gases can come up into buildings. So in addition to contaminating the groundwater and making it undrinkable, they also cause vapors to come up into buildings, even homes, and that's become a big problem too. You wouldn't think there's that many dry cleaners, but just like gas stations, they moved around to find the best economic place for their business. So we've been looking at a lot of old directories and maps and historic records, and have found literally thousands of dry cleaners in the state of Indiana, and I think we're just touching the tip of the iceberg on that. By program, currently we have about 2,000 active leaking underground storage tanks. We have several hundred in our voluntary remediation program, 400 in RCRA corrective action, only 70 in our federal programs. Those are the Superfund sites. They're really big. That's why there aren't as many sites, just because they tend to be really big sites. State cleanup 700, and a couple hundred active sites in brownfields. Overall, we're pushing 4,000 sites that we're working on at this time. You'll notice in state cleanup we have 700 active sites. That is where we're doing a lot of the work on dry cleaners. We probably have a backlog of a couple thousand dry cleaners at least that we haven't even begun to look at or address yet. So there are a lot more sites coming, particularly from the dry cleaners. And this may be a little bit difficult to see up on the wall. Each of these little dots on the map represents a site in northwest Indiana. So that's kind of what this region of the state looks like relative to the sites that we're all working on up here. So there's a lot going on up here, and there's a lot yet to come. So we remediate sites several different ways. Initially, when the department was formed and EPA was created, the initial way of cleaning up sites was typically, well, what was it like before? There was nothing, background. So you would look at a site and say, what should this normally be? And you would clean it up to that level. What we quickly found was that it's really technically infeasible to clean a site up to its original clean state. There will always be some amount left behind. And the trick is to try and clean it up to a level that is safe. So a lot of times we're still leaving contaminants in the ground and in the water, but they're at such low levels that they don't pose a health threat to anyone. Now sometimes it leaves a lot behind and we can't even get it to those levels. So at a certain point we started looking at, instead of looking at some level or number and saying you have to clean it up below this number or this level, we started looking at the actual risk posed and who was exposed to it. So we call that risk-based approach to cleanup. And if no one's drinking it, if no one's touching it or being exposed to it, then it's safe. And so changes in the Indiana law allow people to clean up their sites to a point where no one's being exposed and no one's being harmed and there is no risk. And how do you do that? Well, there's a variety of ways you can do that, and some of those Nancy will talk about in terms of the institutional controls and restrictive covenants that you can put on a property so that nobody's being exposed to these types of contaminants. For instance, you can't drink the water from any wells on this property, or you can't dig in this location because it would bring up contaminants. So there are ways of preventing exposure that the law now allows people to do that are a way of getting to some point of closure at your site. I think that's about it.
Can we ask a quick question? Sure. On the restrictive covenants, I know that I'm a little familiar with that. Depending on the amount of remediation that might or might not be required there, is there an end date on those restrictive covenants as far as a particular site where after so many years that the restrictive covenant could be taken off of that property?
There can be a request for termination of a restrictive covenant, and depending on the site specifics, the agency may call for an assessment of what the current risk is at the site.
Okay.
So as Bruce pointed out, a lot of gas stations, that kind of contamination does attenuate over time, so there may be a point in time where that degrades and it's easy to demonstrate that that risk may no longer be present. Other ones are more persistent, but there is a way out, a process to request it. It may involve sampling.
Thank you.
Okay, so Bruce mentioned in Indiana there's two main ways that land use controls are used as prevention to exposure, and that's restrictive covenants and environmental restrictive ordinances. And the ordinances are newer than the covenants have been in use since around 2000. The restrictive ordinances came about in 2009 with some changes to law. So the restrictive covenants, essentially, the difference between the two is a restrictive covenant is a document that lists specific land use restrictions for a particular parcel of land. The owner of the property agrees to abide by these restrictions and obligations. The document is recorded at the county recorder's level and it goes into the chain of title so that it passes down from owner to owner and that memory is still in place. Restrictive covenants are by law, and environmental restrictive covenants. So there's a distinction. ERCs are enforceable by item. And we've got about 1,500 ERC sites in the state right now. This is, again, this may be a little bit hard to see. Oops, what happened? This is supposed to illustrate just some ERC sites in northwest Indiana. The difference between the yellow and the red outlines are one is proposed and one is final. What we're trying to do is sort of GIS out the actual property boundaries. So we've got polygons and we've got a mapping tool that you can actually go in and see where those land use restrictions apply. So the second means of control are the environmental restrictive ordinances. These are ordinances that specifically pertain to groundwater. The definition is in Indiana law, and it says essentially that it's an ordinance that controls the use of groundwater to a degree that protects human health. And the law goes on further to say that there's notification requirements on both ends, on the local county, on the local government unit end, and on items end, to try to bring in that three-way communication when they're being used as a remedy. By definition, though, the definition of an ERO may include some pre-existing citywide ordinances, and that's one of the reasons we're up here is we're trying to do a little outreach, because we receive lots of proposals for different sites, and we want you to be aware that we may get a request to use the existing city ordinances in the ERO. So we may have new ones created for site specifics, and then there may be some already on the books that are entire corporate limits. And because EROs are local law, they're not enforceable by IDA. Here's a couple of examples of some EROs that were established for individual sites. So you can see that there's several parcels of land involved here. We're trying to make sure we have a defined, delineated map available that's viewable so that there's clear understanding on what properties may fall within and what may fall without an ERO. This is just a listing of some of the proposals we have received. This doesn't mean that the agency has approved the use of them for these municipalities, but this is just a demonstration of the number of proposals we're getting is growing. The black text are cities and towns where there's pre-existing citywide ordinances in place, and the blue ones are newly proposed, smaller site-specific ordinances. The ERO proposals, these kind of projects take a long time to work through the system. So it can take a long time before remediation is actually approved on some of these more complex, difficult to delineate and characterize sites. When we get a proposal, IDEM is trying to be a neutral party and provide information on anyone who's interested in looking at an evaluation, stakeholders, the public. We take a proposal from a consultant, turns one, and we're looking for several different factors in determining whether or not that proposal effectively manages risk. So we look at the ordinance language, we look at the details about the groundwater plume, if we know if it's delineated, is it stable, are there nearby water wells nearby, water in use nearby, and that could be potable well, drinking water wells, or heavy industrial use that may impact sort of the plume dynamics. And then we want to make sure the ordinance area is big enough. If there's a well permitting authority, have they been included into the loop? Property owner awareness, and if there's exceptions or variances allowed by the ordinance. So, and the last thing that we're seeking, and we really, really want to pay attention to, is the local government input onto the proposal. So when we get a proposal, at some point, IDEM is going to send a letter to cities and towns asking for their input. The letter is going to ask for a variety of things, a point of contact so we can follow up on, specifically any general comments that the town or city may have. If there's existing ordinances, have there been variances or exceptions granted to those? So we're here to say we welcome your input into that decision making. And I'm going to leave you with just, we've got some resources available out there. In addition to, obviously, one-on-one contact is encouraged. We have some online Indiana map, which is just sort of like the statewide GIS tool that you can go in. You can look at remediation site locations. You can also look at institutional restrictive covenant locations, like I showed you on the map a little earlier. We have an institutional controls registry, and that's essentially on ITEM's webpage. It's a listing of all the sites that have closed using some form of land use control, and it listed out by the type of land use restriction. So if it's no residential use, no groundwater use, some sort of excavation, it lists that specifically. And then the virtual file cabinet is our electronic repository of documents. So with that, we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Nancy or Bruce? Yes.
Is one of the issues, like as I understand it, ERC, the covenant is like a deed restriction. So if I went and I looked at the land record on the deed, it would say it's restricted to this type of use, correct?
It is like that. Now, I'm going to say it's not actually written onto the deed itself. A restrictive covenant, I have seen deed restrictions that are in the deeds, but this is cross-referenced to a deed. And in it has a legal description attached to it so that this document is tied to the deed for that property.
But so what my question is like a deed restriction or a covenant or something that's tied to it, I don't know, is harder, a little bit harder to change than an ordinance? I mean, we have to change ordinances with another ordinance, but are you, one thing you're trying to do is to make sure that we are all aware of what is involved in this ordinance? Is that correct?
We want to make sure that we're not making a decision outside input that should be brought into it. So say, for instance, there's some sort of planned regional water use going to be going on that we don't know about. So you're developing a new wetland protection area or something. That's kind of information that wouldn't be readily available to us.
Hey, Mayor, you had your hand up first, and then we'll go to Kevin.
Yes, I had a question. I know that there's an area of law that looks at trying to hold the insurance companies of gas stations, dry cleaners, and other historically contaminating entities accountable. Is there any guidance on your website in terms of how to engage in that type of activity? Because maybe it doesn't always have to be the retaining of a firm.
I don't think we have any guidance on how to do that, and my recommendation would be to hire a good environmental attorney to help you with that. But you're correct. The recent court cases have ruled in favor of responsible parties collecting insurance money to help pay for the things that happen at their property. So, and I would say too that if it weren't for some of those rulings, that the insurance money that is being spent to clean up a lot of the dry cleaner sites, they just wouldn't be cleaned up because the people that operated the dry cleaner are long gone. You know, these are ones that operated back in the 40s and 50s sometimes. So it is an important source of funding for cleaning up sites. I think just to reiterate what Nancy said too, is that the state doesn't want to make decisions about your community without you having the chance to have input into it. And some of the decisions we make may affect groundwater use in your community, and we want to make sure that you've had a chance to provide us your input. So here we are. Introduced ourselves. If something like this happens in your community, please feel free to call either Nancy or myself, and we'll be glad to work with you. The law allows people to do this sort of thing, but ultimately it's up to the community whether they want that ordinance or not. And so we're not here to argue one way or the other. Our main thing is it safe? And we want you to know that this is happening in your community. It's entirely your decision.
Kevin?
You partially answered my question. Correct me if I'm wrong. A covenant is controlled by affected parties, usually resolved through a civil suit. Usually it's part of a subdivision or the local community, not the governmental community, but just the local citizens can enforce a covenant. Statutes allow the state and its officers to enforce the law. The ordinances, and it sounds like you're setting us up for model ordinances or asking the municipalities and counties to enforce this environmental activity. Not a bad thing, but we need to be aware of what it's going to cost our local governments. You know, it's a good goal, but at the same time, sometimes we look at these things as unfunded mandates. How do we proceed from here? Do you have model ordinances? How do you suggest we find or enforce? And what kind of support are these local governments going to get from the state and the
Well, I mean, you bring up some very relevant points for consideration.
You know, ultimately, whether you have an ordinance or not is up to the local community. Ideally, we would like to see a really good, if you're going to have that ordinance, that you would have some kind of compliance and enforcement with it. I'm not sure, you know, the legislature through its statutes has more or less instructed us to limit our decision-making based on the risk posed by the ordinance. So we're really only allowed to approve or deny someone's proposal to close their site or the remedy that they propose based on the risk that's posed by what they propose. And we're not really allowed to get into local politics, or, you know, sometimes we see things like environmental restrictive covenants where the law firm will write its own firm into that covenant so that if anyone ever violates it, they have to call that law firm to go forward with dealing with it. And in the past, we were saying no to that, and the legislature said, no, you don't need to be involved in that. Restrict your decision-making to the risk process itself. And so we are somewhat limited by the law as to how much say we have in these. Model ordinances are nice, but ultimately it would have to be what's worked out with. I mean, we can't really impose a model ordinance on anyone. We can make suggestions, I think.
We may have a template. We have a template for restrictive covenants. Does anyone have to use it? No, they can't. So we throw out a template of what we think a good sound one might be. And we'll probably consider doing that on the environmental restrictive ordinance.
Any other questions, comments?
One more comment. This is a timely discussion because of like the EPA's, the revolving loan fund for brownfield redevelopment in our area. And that is exactly tied to this, you know, land reuse for economic development and making sure that it's used for something that is below your risk factor and keeping it that way. Yes?
Right.
I mean, and all parties involved, but it's also encouraging us to do that. So that's great.
Carnahan?
We have an old gas station that IDEM came up in white suits and swarmed all over the area, and then it ended up becoming on the bottom of the list of a super fund. And eventually the Lake County took over the property, and it got resolved to where the property was sold to business, and now it's back on the tax rolls. Is there any way I could get a copy of a file of what happened there and the closure of that?
If you give us some details about where it's located, we might be able to pull up a record for you.
Call one of us and we'll.
All right, I'll get a card for you.
I've got a card.
Thank you.
Again, this topic is huge and we could go on for hours, and that's why we gave the contact information. So feel free to call us and we'd be glad to talk to you at length.
I just wanted to let commissioners know a lot of the GIS information that has been mentioned has been integrated into NERC's GIS. Sarah Ganotsky on our staff, Sarah, if you could raise your hand, is available to assist any of you with that GIS data and getting the right information.
All right. Thank you again for coming in. Okay, we'll move to report of the Executive Director, Ty Warner.
Thank you. Thanks for getting here in the rain today. I hope last time, speaking of coming to the building, that you were able to see the materials for the new building, the color scheme, et cetera, that the architect had out. I'm going to let Commissioner Tun talk about status of the building itself, but just to say that in terms of furniture and all those kind of good things, that's all on track, and I think we're excited about the change happening here, hopefully shortly. Wanted to say a quick congratulations to Hobart. I had a lot of fun writing in the first compressed natural gas waste hauler in Lake County. Was that Monday, I think it was? And congratulations to the city of Hobart for that. Deb Backus, South Shore Clean Cities partnership with them to put that into place. So congratulations on the municipal fleet. The Green Fleets program, which several of the communities at NERC are a part of, is a great program that you can talk to Kathy more about to be able to assist and provide that one-on-one technical assistance towards converting municipal fleets towards alternative fuels. Speaking of fuels, the Highway Trust Fund, just a quick update on that, because I know that's a topic we keep watching, of course. You're probably already familiar with this, but a stopgap measure was passed. I think Congress passed it on the end of July, and then I think President Obama signed it into law on August 8th. That takes us out, I believe, till May of 2015. So still, the future are concerned, but at least the Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Foxx, had earlier issued a letter of the concern of funds available for projects if that hadn't happened, but now he has, I don't know if rescinded is the right word, but he's issued a follow-up letter saying that there will be no reduction of funds because of that law, at least until they figure out the next step after that. So far so good on that score. One of the things that is required of MPOs is to update their regional transportation plan every so often. The 2040 Comprehensive Regional Plan, our award-winning plan, is due to be updated, and we don't anticipate a massive overhaul of that. We'll be doing a series of meeting palooza things happening across the region coming up in the next couple of months. I believe at your places you have that initial list of meeting locations, and we'll be seeking input on what needs to keep that plan current. One of the things that I just feel compelled to share is because I think we don't necessarily trumpet this enough. The national award, the Burnham Award, received a lot of attention, but I believe actually the count is about 8 in terms of the awards that plan has won. And we're going to try to, in the course of this, also do a little bit better job of making that known. This plan has received a continual amount of attention, and I think serves the region real well and reflects well on all those that have contributed to it. I was talking about the building earlier. Staff is continuing to plow along on things even in the midst of a little bit of upheaval coming up with the building change. I mentioned the last time, and I'll just mention it again. NERC really is taking a real strong leadership role with a transportation and logistics groups that is part of the Alliance for Regional Development. This is a tri-state effort that grew out of earlier efforts from the Chicagoland Chamber, the OECD group globally. And in terms of economic development across 3 states, NERC has been really leading that charge in developing a regional asset database, and that work continues, as I mentioned last time. So proud of staff's involvement in that, and we'll continue to be a part of that, leading towards a major summit coming up in December. We also had recently a very successful rooftop solar workshop here in this facility that Kathy put together. This is part of our grant from the Department of Energy. And we had a track in here talking about challenges to municipal ordinances in implementing solar facilities. And I was on a mobile workshop that went out and looked at solar installations across this region where this has been successfully deployed. On a day like this, it's hard to imagine solar energy being much of a factor, but as was mentioned often, Germany is the foremost country in promoting solar use, and I don't think their climate is a whole lot different from ours here in northwestern Indiana, so there's a lot of potential here, and we're glad to be part of this national effort to look at challenges to installing solar. I'm going to shortly turn it over to Mayor Freeman Wilson here, if that's all right, with the chair. Just congratulations to Gary, first of all, for the EPA grant, Green Infrastructure Grants. Continuing good things happening in Gary, and the federal attention that Gary has received. One of those is the Strong Cities designation from the White House, and NERC was happy to be part of the sort of logistics and base for creating the opportunity for a symposium related to that grant. and provided that support for the federal agencies that put on that symposium. Very well attended with, I think, about 250 attendees altogether that came to that event, descending on Gary to focus on their designation and what stems from that. So with the chair's permission, I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Freeman Wilson to give a little bit more background on what that means to Gary and the region.
Thanks, Ty and Mr. Chair, and to the members of the Executive Board and all of the people present here today. You know, Ty and I were talking, and it's one thing, and we're certainly pleased that Gary has gained attention, but you know, I've been around long enough to know that sometimes people might be inclined to ask what's in it for me or my community. And so I thought it was important, and really at the symposium, we focused on why is this important, not just to the city of Gary, but all of Northwest Indiana. And one of the things that I want folks to understand is that the Strong City, Strong Communities designation does not come with a grant per se. What it does is it really adds capacity, because as those who run municipalities or who run government and operate government every day, you know, there's a planning component and there's an implementation component. And sometimes in the implementation, we can get so focused in that implementation, particularly when it involves putting out fires, that you don't have the opportunity to really engage in the level of planning that you'd like to do every day. And certainly Ty and his team involve or engage in planning every day, and you have that luxury. But we don't always have it at the municipal level. So one of the big benefits of the Strong City, Strong Communities designation is to look at planning, and planning not just for planning's sake, but for sustainability and for really maximizing the implementation of it in the short term and in the long term. So that was the focus of this symposium, that really focused on areas that involved economic development, transportation and land use, public health, housing, and community development. And why that's important is because if we are able to do that as a community and look at the way that we connect with our neighbors and with the overall region, then there is a benefit. There's a benefit that comes with really our ability to access whatever federal, state, local partnerships that can benefit specific projects. But it's not just one-off successes like the creation of the public-private partnership at the airport, and the demolition of the Sheraton, but it's how those one-off successes, specifically like the airport, like the transit-oriented development planning that occurred during the symposium, like taking a deep look at the environment, which was one of the things that occurred at the symposium, how that really works to the benefit of all of Northwest Indiana. I think that the specific benefits are really looking at some of the cutting edge solutions that have come out, and I'll give you one example. The Ralston Street Lagoon in Gary has been something that has been a thorn in the community side for a long time because of the contamination, because of the impact that it had on residents. And so we were able to remediate the Ralston Street Lagoon, but because of a renewed partnership with the EPA, we were also able and are looking at how we can use that remediation plan to really deal with the contamination that exists with the Calumet River, how that might be done in partnership with existing programs at the EPA, to not only bring that into compliance, but to also prevent the future contamination of the Grand Cal River, which not only goes through Gary, but goes through other communities. So that's one example. Another example is the engagement of our university community. We have Purdue University, we have Indiana University, all in Northwest Indiana. How are we engaging them? Are we maximizing our partnerships with them? How do they work to the benefit? Ivy Tech is in many of our municipalities. How do we use those relationships and how do we leverage the abilities that exist at those educational institutions to benefit our cities, our towns, and what do those partnerships look like? And so, you know, there's an old adage that says a rising tide lifts all boats. There's also an adage that says one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. It might not spoil the whole bunch, it can impact the whole bunch. I prefer to look at it from the positive standpoint, and that is that as Gary, the city of Gary gets stronger, there is a direct impact, a direct positive impact on Northwest Indiana. And whether it's leveraging relationships, whether it's becoming aware of federal or state funds that may be available to the city of Gary, to all of Northwest Indiana, or whether it's looking at the way that we interact with one another and the way that we interact with both public and private entities, I think that there is certainly a direct benefit. Lastly, I'll point out that NERC was a lead partner on the symposium, and I think that's unprecedented in terms of our partnership with NERC. There have been staff members from all entities, both nonprofit, public, private, involved in the entire planning process, and we anticipate that that will continue. And to the extent that that exists, I think that makes us all better, that makes us all stronger, and we are glad to be a part of that process.
Any questions of Mayor Freeman? Thanks again. All right, let's move to finance and personnel. Mr. Tunn.
Thank you, sir. The Finance and Personnel Committee met this morning, received various information and updates and reports. We do bring a couple items for action to the Executive Board this morning. The first are budget amendments, one and actually Amendment 3 and 4. There are additional funds for various projects that are listed here on the sheet. I believe they're in everybody's folder. And the Finance and Personnel Committee is requesting action and has recommended approval of the Amendments 3 and 4 for additional funds. I will entertain a motion to approve those amendments.
You're making the motion. Nancy's making the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? There's no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Amendment number 5 is transfer between categories. We have received the 20% increase on our audit charge. We had budgeted $9,000 and the bill came to $9,419, and it did not give a detailed explanation. This is just due to the state as it is. So we have to use some funds from another source and move them in order to pay the state for the audit. So I will report that the committee recommended approval of amendment number 5, and I will ask for a motion to approve that amendment.
So So moved.
Second. A motion, I have a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The next item that I have, and that you have in your packet, is a basic agreement between Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission and Quandrel Associate Consultants, LLC, for bikes on trains study, and that would be procured under RFP 1404. The total compensation is $194,750. The terms, the services must be completed by July 31st, 2015. This is not NERC money. We are acting as a flow-through from the contributions of various other agencies to fund this study. So the bikes and on trains contract for the study is strongly recommended, unanimously recommended by the Finance and Personnel Committee, and I would be glad to entertain a motion to approve that contract.
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The third thing I wanted to mention, and I'll ask Ty to step in if he sees anything that I've omitted or would like to add to anything I would report, is on the building project, an update on the building report. We had a meeting this morning, as I said, of Finance and Personnel, and one of the presentations was from Holiday Properties, and they gave us an update on where they are in the process. I can say two things have taken place or will take place shortly, and one is the plans to be sent to the state. That should take place within the next couple of weeks. We were assured this morning of that. It's good to get some traction under that because the state approval of those plans has to be done before any contracts can be let or any action of any significance taken in the remodeling of the building. Also, we were notified that Comcast has given us notice that they will be installing all of the requested capability from them in September. So we're looking forward to Comcast installation and construction in September. Ty, is there anything more you'd like to add to that? The furniture, as you said, is all taken care of. So at some point down the line, we will have to look at another alternative meeting place, and that will be a good thing. We'll look forward to that because it'll mean something's happening on this project. So it is getting some traction. I'm glad to report. Certainly.
Just a couple of things. We'll keep you posted, of course, on the meeting location. I doubt things will move that quickly in September, but we're just looking at contingencies just in case. The Construction Advancement Foundation has offered their space in September. If we need it, I'm not sure that we're going to need it, but just so you know that there's contingencies in place for that. If with Commissioner Tun's permission, just a real quick note on the bikes on trains. Jack Eskin from our staff, against the wall back here, is the lead on that project. Would be happy to talk to you about any questions. And Bob Moore from Quandrel Consultants, who just approved the contract with, is also against the wall there. And I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about this project. But I wanted you to associate the names with the faces as that moves forward. That's had a lot of attention, and we're excited to get that underway.
It is. Thank you. That concludes my report.
All right. Are there any questions? Finance personnel? Okay, we'll move on to Environmental Management Policy Committee. Jeff Benson.
We have that agenda, or the minutes, the draft minutes in the package, which you're welcome to read. We used a lot of our time with the presentation today. Thank you for allowing that. That was a timely one. And we welcome you all to our next Environmental Management Policy Committee meeting. It's always the first Thursday at 9 o'clock in this room.
All right, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Benson? Okay, we'll go to Northwest Indiana Economic Development District, Roosevelt Allen.
Yes, good morning. The Northwest Indiana Economic Development District met on July 31st. And at that meeting, there was a change in our bylaws to meet the requirements and suggestions from the Economic Development Administration. We reduced the members of our board from 17 members to 11 members. And the members of the board will be selected by the board. The EDA wants us to become an autonomous organization. Also at that meeting, there was further discussion concerning the accounting review, and some of the representatives met with Joe Kernan for an exit interview from the accounting firm of Joe Kernich from the accounting firm of Kernich and Associates. Also, I received a letter on August the 11th from Jeanette Tamayo. She is the regional director for the Midwest for the Economic Development Administration. And in the letter, she indicated that our organization is one of the finalists for some additional funding, grant funding. And it seems that we will be getting some additional funds in the amount of $20,000 from the EDA under the short-term planning program grant. So that's a positive indication from the EDA that we are continuing to meet their criteria and comply with all of their requests and their requirements. Also at that meeting, there was a discussion on obtaining additional funds from the RDA. And we have met with some of the representatives from the RDA to try to get some additional local funding to assist us in operating our organization. Currently, our organization, a lot of the operation is through in-kind assistance from NERC and from the Northwest Indiana Forum. And so we're going to make a request to the RDA to see if we can get some operational funding from the RDA, because we do, the Economic Development District, we are a regional organization. We do represent Lake Porter and LaPorte County, and our primary function is to assist these units of government in Lake County, Porter County, and LaPorte County in obtaining funding from the Economic Development Administration. And so that's why our organization was formed in the first place, and it only has a specific purpose. Our purpose is to maintain the SEDS, which is a requirement of the EDA, and that's a requirement that you have to have before a unit of government in the three-county region can apply to the EDA for funding. You have to be, your projects have to be part of our SEDS document. So we actually act as a filtering agent for the EDA. We are still positioning ourselves to obtain full district status, official district status with the EDA, and from our conversations and communication and correspondence with the Chicago district, it seems that we are on the right track. We're running the gauntlet. So far we have fulfilled all of the requests and criteria that they have asked of us. We're at the tipping point now. We're right there at the top, and if we can get over that tipping point, then we can become a completely autonomous organization, because then we qualify for operational funding from the EDA. The operational grants are 3-year grants, and it's my understanding that once you get your first operational grant, that it actually becomes perpetual, even though you have to reapply every 3 years for it. Once you get approved and you get it, it becomes perpetual. So if we can get funding from the RDA, because you are the units of government, you contribute revenue, your casino revenue, to the RDA. And so we feel that the RDA should grant us some of that revenue, because we are acting as the facilitator or the liaison between you and the EDA, so you can start accessing EDA money. The EDA grants, nationally, annually they give out $700–800 million, almost up to $1 billion in grants. Northwest Indiana has never been able to get the EDA grants because this organization did not exist. So it was created to enable the units to be able to access that EDA money. And also, once we become autonomous and get our own operating funds, then the smaller units of government that need assistance, you need grant assistants, grant writers, and someone to act on your behalf to assist you in getting money from the EDA, we will be able to do that. So that's what we're trying to do. So our next meeting has not been scheduled. As I indicated, we're down from 17 members to 11 members. So when we had 17 members, it took, 9 members to get a quorum. Now that we're down to 11 members, it only takes 6 members to get a quorum. That means we become a more efficient and more effective organization, and we can move along much faster, because we've never had a problem getting 6 people to a meeting. So that means we can be even more effective now. And so that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Any questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to Indiana Department of Transportation. Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The repair contracts, emergency repair contracts, and North contract, I know you haven't seen much of it over here, but unfortunately, that's my fault. When we created the emergency repair contract, we did not stipulate where they would begin. So they decided to begin in St. Joe County and come west. Again, my fault. I've learned a lesson from that, and that is to be more articulate in the language that we include in the contract to make sure that they understand they should have started west and went east. The greatest damage that we have is in Lake, mainly Lake County. I would guess that every road that we have north of US 30 from the winter is damaged in one way or another. It's a big problem, and we're trying to address it. For all of you, I look around, Jim, I think we at last solved your problem. Brian, I've already got people working on yours. They left this morning. Commissioner Allen, I believe my guy showed up and took care of things for you. Mayor Copeland, your landscape consultant contacted me yesterday. Brian Donzie will be getting with him to talk about that issue out there. We got a lot of things going on. We're trying our best. Unfortunately, as some of you are experiencing with the changes in the Public Employees Retirement Fund, to give you an idea of the attrition factor that we're experiencing right now, between tomorrow and a week from tomorrow, I will lose another 20 employees. In the budget battles, as we went through our budgeting process a few months ago, I spent the better part of 2 months justifying a need for another 35 employees. Was successful in accomplishing that. The problem, I can't keep up with the people going out the door. the hiring process in government sometimes can be very complex. It isn't where I can go, okay, I like you, I'm employing you. It's a little more complex than that. And to give you an idea of where I'm at right now, I needed 35 people and was funded for more people and was funded for that as of July the 4th, or July the 1st, I'm sorry. Right now I'm off about 60 people, just simply because of retirements based on the changes in the retirement fund. I'm also I'm getting to a situation right now where I need this next 45 days to get these people on board, get them CDLs, get them trained to plow snow, get them ready for the winter. We know what we went through last winter. So it's a complex situation. We're trying hard. I have a meeting with my own staff this afternoon to say, I don't care how you do it, do it. It's just that simple. And whoever gets in your way, let me know, and I'll be more than happy, as indicated, to cut the red tape in order to get it done. We were asked to justify replacements for some of the experienced people. And I can understand those economic type questions, but we went through this process, us, NDOT as an agency went through this process about 3 months ago. So we went into the budget process. So I think I've already justified those positions. So if you hear about me being beat up in Indianapolis and sent home, that's okay. Because this is an important thing and we just need to make it happen. I'm here to listen to anything that you need from me, and with that, I'll shut up.
Any comments or questions?
I have a question. Could you use our help? Would it help you if everyone around this table sent an email to your boss encouraging them to support you?
Oh, my boss supports me.
His boss.
his boss, and I understand what his boss is trying to do in saying that, when you lose people, you need to be able to justify those positions. For us, we have gone through this process already, and I'm emphasizing that as I push this forward. It's hard. I don't want to just hire anybody. And consequently, I want there to be some process where we say, yes, this is a person worthy of employment by us. I don't want to hire every person who walks through the door, because that never works out. I sometimes wonder if we shouldn't use a temporary service to begin with. Get ourselves 60 days of experience with people so that they understand how hard the job is, and then pick the employees you believe are going to be lasting employees. It's very difficult to hire somebody and lose them a month later. This is not an easy job. Let me tell you, when you work 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week for 2.5 months plowing snow with 5 days off total, it will take its toll on you. I don't care who you blame. It's a complex situation that we're in right now. I'm pulling out all stops as of this afternoon. I will give HR any assistance they need in order to process the paperwork. I want 60 people on board, period. Yes, sir?
What's the salary scale for the 60 people you need?
Well, different salaries for different jobs. I need a district testing engineer. I lost the leadership positions that I've lost is incredible. I need a traffic manager, which is the guy over the whole traffic section. I need a sub manager. I have 5 subs. I have 3 subs that have managers. I have 1 person that's being promoted to take over another, but I still have 1 sub manager's job. Those are about $50,000 in jobs. Based on experience, the testing engineer, the district testing engineer can make $50,000 to $70,000 a year. The maintenance workers, which is where we're really short of a large number of people, is $13 to $15 an hour with more overtime than you can stand. There's a mass number of jobs out there, and people are vacating them every day because of retirement, because of the money they'll lose on retirement if they don't.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just make a real brief comment. In light of all of the difficulties and in light of all the years that I put in on the council and working with different people, I'd have to compliment Mr. Alderman for his responsiveness in dealing with issues that we all face locally. And it's been one of the most pleasurable and positive working relationships we've had with the Indiana Department of Transportation. So congratulations on doing a good job, even in spite of the difficulties.
Thanks, Jim. I'm willing to admit that I'm a masochist. I love the legislature, and if you don't mind if I editorialize, Mr. Chairman. Sure. I left the legislature because it became all politics and little public policy in my eyes. It's my opinion only. I take off my NDOT hat right now. I like where I'm at. Number one, I'm a city boy. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. But other than the Ohio State Buckeyes, damn, Braxton Miller, that was horrible. I'm a Hoosier to the bone. I love this state. But the people here are patriots, number one. If you look at Indiana and the history of Indiana, since the Civil War, Indiana's either first or second on a per capita basis in the number of people that go off to war when there are declared wars in this country. These are basically Hoosiers are hardworking, spiritual people who just want to be left alone. So I thought it was important in the legislature to make public policy rather than beat somebody or get somebody elected. At times I was in the minority. Coming here and coming to NDOT, I just feel like this is a place where I can do things without a lot of media exposure and do it with all the right motives, and that's just to see things better, to be able to work with other people to make good things happen. Like I said, I'm a pacifist. I can't help it.
I want to echo Mr. Kuhn's comments also. I've been mayor almost 12 years now and had a lot of relationships with NDOT over the years, and Bob's relationship with City Hammond is outstanding. I think he does a great job. And I really feel that politics doesn't play any interest at all in his decision making, and I appreciate that. And I want to also echo, I think they've done a lot better this year in maintaining the right of ways, off ramps, on ramps, things like that. I think that's great, because sometimes during this time of year, you'll see the weeds get 3 or 4 feet high. And I just saw them knocking them down the other day, and it goes noted, and I appreciate it. Even though people don't call you up and say, thanks, Bob, I notice it. So, and I do get asked a lot of questions out there about the status of the Klein Avenue Bridge. I don't know if it's properly attributed to you, or I know Chicago's playing a role in this, but I don't know what to tell people anymore, because the semi-traffic through Hammond that used to go on the Klein Avenue Bridge is now in my neighborhood, on the boulevard. It's now on Kennedy. It's now on Calumet, and it's significant. 18-wheelers going through neighborhoods, 18-wheelers going through places that aren't known for it. And this is traffic that used to go on the Klein Avenue Bridge, and now it's in my neighborhood. And it seems like it's at a stalemate. It's frustrating, because I don't want these semis in my neighborhood anymore. And neither do my neighbors, and I imagine residents of East Chicago or Gary or Whiting. And it just seems like there's nothing going on. And that's not your fault, Bob. I just need to know what to tell my constituents.
I think that as we're going forward, are we not, Mayor Copeland?
Yes.
When you're operating, and I don't speak for the mayor, of course. I would simply say that the same trucks that you're pointing out are running on my roads in your city too.
Beating up the roads you just built.
On Mayor Copeland's.
I mean, you just rebuilt the boulevard, and they're beating the heck out of it as we speak, and it's beautiful. But next year it's going to be beat up because of all this semi-traffic.
Well, hopefully we'll keep moving forward. And maybe you'll want to respond there.
We're looking in 3 weeks. Ms. Figg should be coming, having a press conference. The funding, I talked to her just on yesterday, and all the funding is secured. The bridge design and everything submitted will be submitted to NDOT for their final approval next week. And like I said, in 3 weeks, she should be here and just unveil everything. The project is on schedule. She's been meeting with suppliers and the contractors, tighten up everything. She's been coming into the area looking for laydown areas because they're going to actually produce the final product that they link up the span of the bridge with on site. So it has been, but I'm like you would think, like that Caterpillar. I've been real slow.
Do you have is there like a projected date of completion, Mayor?
Well, but that's what she's going to unveil when she comes in about 3 weeks. I'll say about either the first week in September or the second week in September. She'll be here.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, moving on, we'll move to other business. Mayor McDermott, do you have anything on the legislative?
No, I am going to get another, my goal is to have, I realize that there's 2 more full commission meetings left before the end of the year. I plan to have meetings before the next full commission meeting, and I have 2 months before the next one, so.
Okay.
And I understand that Karen Talley, Senator Talley also wants to be included on the distribution list. Mary, can we include her as well?
All right, very good. Justin, do you have anything to report from the Senator's office?
I do not. At this point, she wasn't.
Okay. All right, if there's no other business, we'll move to announcements. Are there any announcements? No. Is this under announcements?
No, I don't. The announcement is that he has no. He caught it off guard. I was checking the gas prices.
I was actually trying to beat Bob to an announcement. I actually do have one, and since getting here, I'm continually amazed at the hidden talents of NERC staff, and I could go down a list on those hidden talents, but one of them is possessed by one of our staff. I don't think Stephen's in the room. Stephen Sosteric. He has a photography exhibit on at the in Munster, the Center for Visual Performing Arts. Just one example here of his work. It's called Omnipresent Sky, and I think it's up. I think we're this till October 5th. It's up there right now. And so, if you're in the Munster area, I would encourage you to go by and see Stephen's work. He's quite talented on this. So.
All right. If there's no other announcements, we'll go to public comments. First is Renee Jackson from Gary. Renee. Can somebody adjust that microphone for her?
Yeah, short folks in the house.
Hi, Renee.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Early afternoon. I was wanting to speak on the, as far as announcements with the upcoming public meetings and public hearings that are coming up in October. And we had reviewed the material that you had sent that you're planning to use. And we asked that you state that the public meetings were being held as a result of agreement reached with Everybody Counts in respect to the class action suit. That kind of mirrors the language that's always been used in past years, but arbitrarily, you kind of decided to say that it's being held in cooperation. Words do make a difference, because that's emphatically incorrect and misleading. So we ask that you rescind that decision. Also that you decided to solicit comments on the South Shore Services, although several opportunities have already taken place to do so. Future of local fixed route buses and complementary paratransit and demand response services is something that kind of concerns a great many people in this area. It's currently a topic of a lot of discussions taking place at different levels. But NERC has kind of historically made great many decisions which impacts that services without the benefit of soliciting our public input. And we would think that you want to take full advantage of public meetings that you're now compelled to hold, so you can see the opportunity to truly engage the comments of the public community in a long overdue dialogue with you. We ask that you specify comments accepted at the public meeting would include but not be limited to the manner in which these services are in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. But you rejected our request stating that that wasn't the purpose of the meeting. You always say that you want to ensure that our concerns and aspirations are consistently understood and considered, but what, never mentioned or never used? That part I just don't understand. Also, according to your 2040 vision statement, you want to work together as a community and improve the public involvement process to eliminate barriers, engage minorities, disabilities, elderlies, and low-income population in the regional decision-making process so you can foster better communication. But that's kind of hard to do. We took a look at your mailing list, and you don't include basic resources as a complete college and university list, human rights commissions so that you can deal with the laws, senior organizations such as social security offices, housing authorities, so that you make sure that you get the elderly and the underserved, NACP chapters or other civil rights organizations so that you make sure that you get the needs of the minorities in the area. You don't have any vocational rehab services or mayor's organizations on disabilities so that you can make sure that you do answer the needs of the disabled. We asked your attorney and he said that NERC is comfortable that they provided a list that is adequately and sufficiently organized. I invite anybody after the meeting to look at my hodgepodge of mess that they sent. We kind of they welcomed and encourage the public participation in their planning activities. They consider the public as stakeholders and they want to involve them in making decisions that affect the future of Northwest Indiana. Lake County alone has over 491,000 citizens. 19% of those are disabled. We always say, nothing about us without us. You can't include us and make decisions for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Next is Rudy Velasco from Chicago.
My quotes from here. You know, I had a list of some things to talk about, but I went to the Stronger Cities event in Gary, and it was a great theme because you got to collaborate, talk about different things from different cities. There I found a couple cities are putting their foot forward to making sure their cities and their communities are ADA compliant. That's on top of their list. Now NERC, we told you about this, we mentioned it to you about the ADA, next year's the anniversary. NERC is not stepping forward anything to do this, anything to acknowledge it. And in this Stronger Cities things, I looked at one of their planning lists. And on that planning list, they have on there about ADA compliant in there. I went to a little park for the events for livable communities, all right? Go to livable communities and they're talking about it. This is our checklist, bike trails and everything, looking at this. I'm like, okay, where's it ADA compliant at? Where's that on the checklist? Oh, it's at the end of the process. Now, you're more concerned about the bike trails than you are about being ADA compliant. If you want to lead the way, which is can do it, we got a D rating in Northwest Indiana. NERC should be ashamed of that. They should be challenging everybody that they give money to and distribute to be ADA compliant. Rather than being on the bottom of a list, it should be on top of the list. You are being transparent. That's the way I see it. I've been to the union, I've worked in the steel mill, you are being transparent, showing that you don't care about the ADA. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. Next is Jim Nowacki from Gary.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jim Nowacki. I'm a resident of the city of Gary, and I did attend the Strong Cities Northwest Indiana Symposium, and I think I have a slightly different take on some of the presentations made earlier. Number one, I paid the $45 attendance fee, and I noticed there was no provision made for waiving that for citizens who might have wanted to attend but were not able to afford $45. I don't know if the commissioners could understand that $45 might be a prohibitive particularly for residents in the city of Gary, which is has a population significantly below the poverty level. So there was no provision made for that. I didn't mind paying $45, but there was no provision made for collecting it at the symposium. I tried to pay it last month at the NERPC. They were not able to take it. Finally, I was able to pay it today, so I didn't want to be a scofflaw regarding that. The one thing I noticed is that of the 250 people who were attended, most of them were what some of you would call stakeholders. In other words, they're employees in different places. And I noticed a fall off as the symposium progressed. Fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people, till by the end of the symposium, it was just a ghost of what it had started at. So in other words, people were signing in and then maybe going somewhere else and doing something else, but they weren't at that symposium. So I did get some very valuable information, but I find that the information had a strong disconnect from what was being presented at the symposium to what's being applied in our city. A big example regarding that disconnect, and I thought, and since it's in the news today, I wanted to bring it to your attention. There was some of this NICD thing. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read it. It had all this great stuff on it. I mean, you read page after page, and you know, I almost just, it's just all this great stuff. And then you get to page 6, and in the smallest print, almost unreadable, in the smallest print, the font doesn't exist anywhere else on it, except in this one little thing. It says, the I-65 US 1220 area has been targeted as a future livable urban center through large-scale adaptive reuse or retrofit. And what that means, I'm going to interpret it for some of you, is they want to close the downtown station and they want to close the Miller station. These are two livable, functioning stations that need some retrofitting, that need some additional use in accord with everything you guys say. But NICD has targeted an area where nobody lives within a mile of it. Nobody lives within a mile of it, and they've targeted that for what they call large-scale adaptive reuse or retrofit. You know what that means? That means a lot of money. A lot of money. And all we're saying is, if you didn't leave that symposium, in other words, if you didn't leave that symposium, you were paid to be there. You didn't pay your $45. I'm not saying anyone particular. You didn't pay your $45 like I paid mine, and I could have used that for a quart of Jack Daniels, which would, my capacity of consumption would have lasted 2 days. But instead, I paid you guys, and I sat through the whole meeting. But a lot of you guys didn't. I'm not saying anyone in particular. You would have found that this is exactly what they're suggesting you don't do. So, in our city we've got a lot of problems, and the biggest problem is this: that the hype and the action are disconnected, and in many ways I think the only thing that stands between those two is citizens being active. Now, if you set up barriers for citizens to attend, you're not going to have the benefit of citizens, not stakeholders. You're going to have the benefit of citizens who are going to look at what's being presented at all these wonderful presentations, And so you'll also understand about the presentations. This wasn't for Gary. This presentation was not for Gary. This is a road show. These are consultants who are paid by the agencies who put it on, the U.S. Department and the U.S. Environmental and U.S. on and on. And they're paid to put on this program, and they go from city to city to city and show what's been done in Milwaukee and Kenosha and all the places, and apply it to. But if citizens were to see the simple, practical solutions that are applied in these instances, and then wonder why in our city they're talking about large-scale adaptive reuse and retrofit of an area that is totally vacant at the expense of areas that are already have the opportunity for improvements. Now I live in Miller, so I have a vested interest in the Miller Station. I have significant investments in downtown Gary, so selfishly, I don't want either of those stations closed. I don't own anything at I-65 and Route 12 and 20, so I could be entirely selfish in my opinion of things. But everybody in this room knows this is not what NERC means. This is not. As a matter of fact, I attend these meetings regularly, and I know that all of the things you guys talk about, you've never talked about this. Closing stations, leaving communities out in the wilderness, closing downtown stations. There's not a city in the world that would close their downtown station. So, you know, I'm going to tell you, it's great. It's great we had this. Great everyone had a good lunch. You know, I don't think the money was wasted, but we've got to have a connection between the hype and an outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I've been following this real closely, obviously. I was involved in 2008 during the first expansion talks that weren't successful, obviously. And I want to let Mr. Nowacki know that, you know, I've had a lot of conversations with Nick D about Hammond, obviously. And in Hammond, we've talked about a lot of things, and I'm sure a lot of those are reflected in that report, Mr. Nowacki. But until the environmental impact statement's completed, which wouldn't be until late 2015, there's nothing concrete. I mean, I'm sure it's just a proposal, maybe it's been talked about. I know that situation was talked about as far back as when Mayor Clay was mayor. I obviously don't speak on behalf of Mayor Freeman Wilson, but I think that they probably just put that in there because it's been talked about in the past. There's nothing concrete until the EIS is completed, and that's not going to be completed for at least a year with the students. So.
Mr. Chairman, let me just correct the record. I've not always responded to ignorance, but there are times that it's required, especially when it's false. The plan that really the Strong Cities, Strong Communities plan that we're building upon focuses specifically on Emerson, Miller, incorporating the lakefront, Glen Ryan, Etna, and Horace Mann. Seminal in that planning are the train stations in the downtown area as well as on Lake Street. Now, we understand what MICD has been talking about and publishing for years, as Mayor McDermott has alluded to. However, we also understand what DOT requires and prefers, and it is totally consistent with what the city of Gary is planning. That was discussed during the symposium held in July. Now, perhaps Mr. Nowacki wasn't in the room, but I just want to be clear for the record, because often people say things and when they're not checked, it goes on as.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, Teresa. Yeah.
So I thought it was important that we let you know that today, the first of a series of press releases have been sent. And this is interesting. Okay, sorry. We're either going to end up in front of a mediator or on the front pages or maybe both. A few weeks ago, we sat around the table with your director and your attorney. Mr. Tan was there, Mr. Snedecor was there. And we were told how very interested NERC is in working with us, which was a really nice thing to hear. And I wish we could believe that. Unfortunately, the fact is the only responses we've received to our communication with your staff has been through your attorney. And that speaks volumes, I think. It is neither helpful nor productive to continue to go over and over and over the same things. I know some of you are real sick and tired of seeing us. We're sick and tired of having to come in here. But, as I said, from recent actions and inactions and correspondence and who answers and what it says, it is beyond clear that your officials have no intention of putting any good faith into the obligations that have been made to the community as a whole, let alone to those area residents who are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. I disagree with Jim on one thing. The stakeholders are not just the people in this room and the people that have been elected to office, it's the people you represent. And one of those stakeholders is a man from Portage who 1 month ago pointed out to you that NERC is allowing some illegal activity and asked for your assistance. It's a month later. We wrote to Mr. Warner, we wrote to the directors of those agencies. The person that answered was Mr. Hollenbeck. And that took a reminder 2 weeks later, and what he said was, well, we're going to give them 30 days to investigate. 30 days from what date? From when? In the meantime, that man, who was a true stakeholder, someone dependent on public transit, is now unable to attend the classes that he intended to take at Ivy Tech to enable him, as a quadriplegic, to become a contributing member of society and be a paralegal. So a month ago, we came to you and said, here's a stakeholder, here's a problem. You're repeating the pattern that led to litigation in Lake County. You're allowing it to happen in Porter County. Please take a look. Mr. Warner, you they are. How do you say you're going to reach out to people? You're going to have a public meeting to get input, but we're not going to include any local organizations or local business or anything like that in our mailing. We're going to advertise the public participation plan, I guess, at some point, but we don't have any problem with the list that we've been using. And as Ms. Jackson said, I invite anybody to look at this mishmash. So what is the point exactly of going through all of the efforts, paying your attorney to go to court and say, yep, we want to make some changes, and then the bottom line being, we will make no changes. We have no intention of making any changes. Mr. Hollenbeck said in writing, the purpose of the public participation plan is not so that the public understands it. And yet you have in the plan, we hope that the reader now understands how they can be involved. How they understand if it's not your intention to make sure that they understand it. It would be really wonderful if those of you who've agreed with us in private about our concerns could somehow find the strength and the courage to say so right out loud. But we know how the game works, so we really won't be surprised when that doesn't happen. Again, no substantive changes of any kind. Substantive. We ask that your public participation plan create accountability. When we do X activity, these are the steps we will take. Your ad hoc committee agreed that that should happen. What you've given us is a document that says, we want to be able to make up our minds each and every time as to what we're going to do. No need to create expectation in the public. No need to build accountability on our part. We're just going to do whatever we determine is appropriate at any given time. And if you're planning on using these mailing lists, which you haven't even bothered to update in 50 years, let alone, in 2 years, you haven't done that. And what your attorney says is, well, you guys, our staff, you do the work. You go out and find these addresses and phone numbers of all of these community organizations, then we'll think about it. How much money did you pay your outreach coordinator? You had a contract with someone. How much money, taxpayer money, did you pay him? And his job description said he was to develop lists. So, lastly, we have also yet to receive a response to the ongoing quest for an answer to our question as to why NERC awarded monies that were earmarked for Hammond residents to Porter County agencies. Mr. Warner, you've said that the decision wasn't just made willy-nilly. Well, if it wasn't made willy-nilly, which willy was it? Because you still haven't answered the question. So if you want us to keep coming in here, and you want to keep paying your lawyer, and you want to keep paying in the newspaper, and you want to keep having to call the police, fine. But we asked you for an opportunity to sit down and have meaningful dialogue about the significant concerns that we brought to you. Your response was, no. We'll meet for 1 hour every 3 months. Okay. If you truly think that just by ignoring all of this, it's going to go away, you're sadly mistaken. So, here's the list. You say we're going to make sure that all these people get notice, but you have nobody on your mailing list. And you've said, your attorney rather, has said, we have no problem with this list. We're perfectly fine with it. So, obviously, when you have that public hearing in October, you're not really going to make sure people get there. If you were going to do that, you'd be asking your members as the Council of Governments to help you advertise that. So it's basically going to be business as usual on your part. It'll be business as usual on our part with a few extra steps. So, again, we have asked, we have begged, we have made very clear what our concerns are. After all this time and all this money and all that money paying for attorney fees, we have a nice chat in a private room, but when it comes down to what's on paper and what you're actually responding to us, so I would like to know, we would like to know, at some point, who's responsible for the letter we just got from Mr. Hollenbeck? Who's responsible for the decisions made that that public participation plan will not build in accountability? I want to know who's responsible, because every time we write to you, your attorney answers. So I'm not sure. Is it your attorney? Is it you? Is it the executive committee? Is it this full commission? It's all we want to know. Who? Thanks.
Thank you, Teresa. If there's no one else, we have a motion. So we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Aye.